Hello, everybody. This is Brett Lonsdale from Lightning Tools, and welcome to another webinar. This afternoon, we're going to be talking about the Lightning Conductor, which is a content aggregation tool, and hopefully you'll be able to, as a potential customer of the Lightning Conductor or as an existing customer, be able to see some different ways where you can go through and aggregate content from SharePoint lists and SharePoint libraries across your SharePoint environments and build reports on that content. So that's the whole purpose. But we're also going to be taking a look at some of the other things that we can do besides lists and libraries and look at aggregating content from throughout Microsoft 365 through things like search and from Microsoft 365 groups, and also from Microsoft Teams and other graph entities as well. So things like Planner and To-Do and things like that. So the Lightning Conductor is going to be something that you can basically report on any kind of content from within inside of Microsoft 365 to be able to find content more easily. And that's the whole purpose of this webinar, is to show you what we can do with that product and also give you a chance to ask any questions that you also want to learn about for the Lightning Conductor. So before we begin, I'll just give you a quick intro to Lightning Tools for anybody that is new to us. So Lightning Tools, we're a company that has been established for 15 years now. And for those 15 years, we've been providing different products for Microsoft SharePoint mostly. That has gone through all of the on-premises versions of SharePoint and also into SharePoint Online and Microsoft Teams as well. We also have a sister company known as Enlightning, and Enlightning is an organization that provides coaching. So we have a team of very patient coaches that will take you from maybe beginner level or even advanced levels, but actually help you to build a solution, whether that's through Power Apps, through Power Automate, or whether it's adopting Microsoft Teams and Microsoft SharePoint, and basically building a solution that is going to work for your organization. So we'll work with you through a series of sessions on achieving that. So a little bit more about Lightning Tools. So the products we provide as a company include, as you can see on the left-hand side, permissions management. So we have a tool that enables site owners and SharePoint administrators to be able to report and manage permissions more effectively and also in bulk. We have the content aggregation tool, which is the Lightning Conductor that we're going to be taking a look at today. And we have a discussion board tool, which is a great feature to add to Microsoft Teams and also to add to SharePoint, so you can design discussion boards to help people share knowledge and help each other inside your organizations. And we also have some data integration and visualization tools. So for SharePoint Online specifically, we have the data viewer that can connect to different external data sources and provide visualizations in reports and also charts. Again, that can be used inside of Teams and also inside of SharePoint. And finally, we also have a list form design tool called Lightning Forms, and Lightning Forms can help you transform a standard SharePoint list form into a very powerful business form that maybe has improved layouts through things like tabs, tabs that can be made visible and hidden, and also creating logic throughout those forms as well in the use of actions and also custom calculations and so on. So that's basically what we do as an organization. And what we're going to look at today is the Lightning Conductor. So the Lightning Conductor is a SharePoint list or library rollup tool. And that's basically how it was first created back in the SharePoint 2007 days, solving a very niche issue. And that was back in SharePoint 2007 days, you couldn't build content reports or aggregated content rollups, whatever we want to call it, across sites that lived in different site collections. So that was the founding reason for building the Lightning Conductor. But as it's evolved, it's become a really powerful tool that helps you to bring content and display it in one place. So we're not talking about importing data into one place or creating a duplicate of content and displaying it in one place, but just reporting on it and making it more accessible to you, so you don't have to keep navigating from one site to another site, or not knowing where to navigate to, more importantly, in order to find content that is important to you. And that content could be documents, could be SharePoint lists such as task lists or issues, or even custom lists as well. And now it's also evolved into this tool where you can also report on the Microsoft Graph entities as well. So Microsoft Graph being really a service where we can go through and query information, whether it's from Microsoft Planner, one of the Microsoft 365 apps, or Microsoft To Do, another one, or even from OneDrive or Teams and so on. So it's more about just building reports regardless as to where that content comes from inside of Microsoft 365 and making it more accessible to you. As well as displaying the content in one place, you can also style the reports in a way that will help make information stand out more. So if we take, for example, task lists, we could just have a long list of tasks, but really we want those to stand out so we can see which of those tasks are high priority, or which tasks are due today, or which tasks are overdue, and so on. So we can accomplish that through things like conditional formatting to really highlight either the background color of that row, or to be able to provide an icon or something that is going to draw your attention to that one particular list item and make that stand out. So that's really a sort of background. That's what we're going to be taking a look at. We're going to start off nice and easy. We're going to take a look at some regular types of queries that we can build around things like task rollups and document library rollups, and hopefully you'll see how easy that can be accomplished using the Lightning Conductor. But then we're going to get a little bit more advanced. We're going to have a look at how we can customize the grid view by using things like conditional formatting and data bars and data formatting as well. And then we're going to get into some other areas such as using search and using Microsoft Graph to be able to query content as well. And the new feature that we announced this year was also the ability to query from Microsoft 365 groups. So of course now when we're creating a modern sites, every single time we create a new SharePoint site, we're actually creating a Microsoft 365 group. And that Microsoft 365 group is not just the SharePoint site, it's also a planner plan. It's also, like I say, a team and anything else that we want to create from it as well. So we've got conversations, a document library, and so on, all belonging to that Microsoft 365 group. So that's another way that we can now go through and query content. We can actually go through and select the Microsoft 365 group that we want to be able to get content from, and not just navigate via SharePoint sites and classic site collections. And towards the end of the session today, we're also going to take a look at working with a couple of other web parts, one of which is free and it's designed to complement the Lightning Conductor, and that is Lightning Filters. So Lightning Filters is something that can provide a filter value to the Lightning Conductor using a web part connection, so that you can maybe have a dashboard of different types of reports being presented to users, and then being able to filter that maybe based on a site property such as the site name, or a query string variable, or even something like the current user or something like that. So we'll jump into the Lightning filters and show you what can be accomplished using that, and also how we can use the data viewer, another product, to be able to chart on some of the content that has been aggregated through the Lightning Conductor as well. And at the end, we'll have lots of time for questions. So if you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A panel at any point. I'll largely try and ignore it until we get to the very end, but then I'll go through and read your questions out and hopefully be able to provide you an answer. And if it's not something I can answer today, then I will get back to you as well after the webinar has taken place. So yeah, first of all, introducing the Lightning Conductor. So as I mentioned, this is something that originally was designed to aggregate from different SharePoint lists and libraries. That could be from within the current site, could be across different sites, across site collections. We also work with hub sites and associated sites as well. So basically, the whole aim of the Lightning Conductor is to save you time going and looking for this content, or actually help you realize that this content exists. Quite often, if we can't find a document or know that a certain document exists, it might be something we therefore go and create and end up duplicating content as well. So the idea here is that we can build very useful reports that can be filtered based on custom metadata and things like that as well, so you can actually see meaningful content being aggregated into a single view. So we'll start off looking at that with the Lightning Conductor, and then we're going to jump into, like I said, the graph and bring in some of these other reports around things like Microsoft To Do and OneDrive and things like that as well. The views that we create can be simply in a grid view, like the one you see in the screenshot here, where you can add and remove columns, you can select rows, you can perform your grouping and things like that, very much like you do in a standard SharePoint list. But we also have a series of built-in JSON views as well. And these are views that we've created, but that you can further customize if you want to, or you can actually build your own JSON views. So that is where you may need to get into a little bit of code if you want to build your own JSON view. And that's also something we provide as a service as well for the Lightning Conductor, so that you can get a view of content that may be very specific to your business needs. So let's take a look at the product. So what I'm going to do is jump into SharePoint, and I can see my editing session has ended, so hopefully I'll come back in a moment. So we've got a SharePoint site here. This is a modern SharePoint site, and inside this environment is basically lots of different site collections. We've got some classic site collections, we've got some teams, and I'm actually in a hub here, which is the Lightning Tools Sales Hub, and that's got some other associated sites as well, and that's how we're going to start to aggregate some content from within that hub. So this is just a modern page, and what I'm going to do is go through and click on to edit. And once I'm in that editing experience, I can add the Lightning Conductor web part. So notice here it's in my frequently used Lightning Conductor web part, but I can also go through and search it if that wasn't the case. So I'm going to basically go through and select it. And from here, we can click on to configure. And this is where we start to build out our reports. And it's something you can do inside of SharePoint, or you can also add the Lightning Conductor to Teams as well as a Teams tab, and we'll be taking a look at that and how it can really sort of fill some of the gaps that still reside in Teams as well, as far as being able to report on content. So first of all, like I said, we're going to start off nice and easy and just take a look at some of the common types of reports that you might want to provide. So one of the ones that is probably the most popular is to be able to do a document library rollup. So we're looking at getting all of our files into one place. And in the Lightning Conductor, you've got this quick configuration where we can go through and just fill out this simple dialogue, hit save, and we get some content. But you've also got the advanced mode as well, where you can be very granular as far as which settings we're going to configure in order to be able to get our report out. And if you're working with custom lists or anything that really you don't see in this drop down here, then the advanced mode is the place to go. This is by no means an exhaustive list of the different types of rollup that you can do. You can really roll up from any sort of content from within inside of Microsoft 365, so custom lists and custom content types included. So we're going to start off with a document library rollup. So I'll select documents from this list here, and there's a few different ways where we can refine the query that we're building. So these are basically just filters that are in place, but we can go through and, of course, create our own custom filters as well. And you'll see here that we've got all documents as the first refinement, but then I could refine that by my documents or my checked out documents as well. So these are just some filters that are filtering by the current user on things like the modified by and created by columns and things like that. Like I say, you could start off with all documents and then add your own filters if you wanted to. So then the third option is more about where the content is going to come from. So the first 5 entries in here are all using the object model, which is going to give us a real-time report of that content. And we can select whether that's going to come from the current site and subsites, which works well for classic site collections. We can choose the entire current site collection, or we've got this one here, which is about working with hub sites and associated sites. So anything that is associated with my hub would also be included inside that query. And we can even go against the whole tenant if we want to as well. So these are all real time, and then the last few options are similar. So we've got current site collection, and current tenant, but they use search. So the performance is going to improve when we're using search, but the results are not real time. They're going to be based on the last time the search index got indexed. So that could be up to sort of 30 minutes or an hour delayed before you'd see that somebody changed their task from in progress to completed or something like that. So we'll start off with the current site and the associated sites, and you can see here we get a choice of how we want to display that content. So we can display it in a grid view, which is where you have your rows and columns, very similar to a SharePoint list. And in this particular instance, we've got a tile view. So that will give us a preview of each document and show us the first page of those documents as well, which is useful if you're just wanting to present a handful of documents so people can actually realize what they are. And there's an option here as well to display person avatars, and that's very useful to actually see the person behind the document who created it or who modified that, and that's using a people card. So very simple query, only takes us a few moments to go through and configure that, and when we hit save, we get that content coming back. So as you can see here, we've got a list of documents, we've got the date that they were created and who they were created by, and also the modified and modified by. Now, this is just a starting point. So if you do want to start creating your own columns or adding your own columns, you can do that by hitting the drop down whilst you're still in edit mode. And you'll notice against the column settings that we've got things like the show columns. So we can go through and select additional columns that we may want to show. And we can also hide columns, we can format them, and so on and so forth. So one example of that would be grouping. So if I wanted to group by something like the modified by, I could simply go through and hit the group, and then we can see the documents that demo 5, demo user 5 last modified, and then the other account that modified all these other documents. And then the people card shows me, like I say, who's behind that document, so we can see who that person is, whether an internal user or an external user, who they report to. We can engage with them through email and chat and that type of thing as well, which is really handy. So that's getting started with the document library rollup. And if I come into the properties of the Lightning Conductor, you'll see here that we've got the property pane for that web part. And in there is a view called default. And what I'm going to do is just change the name of that to documents, so we can see what it is, or we could be even more descriptive and say sales documents if we wanted to, since these are all coming from sales related sites. And now we can also go on and create another view as well. So I can do that by hitting the plus icon. I don't need another instance of the Lightning Conductor. I can just add another view to it. And doing that gives me this this drop down of views here. So I can choose sales documents or new view 1 at the moment, which we're going to rename to tasks. So we can call that tasks, which obviously describes what it does. And then as we go into the properties here, we can again use the quick configuration to bring back task lists. And you'll see how this has changed in the different refinements. So we can choose all tasks or my tasks and my overdue tasks. And again, we can choose where that content is going to come from. And for this example, I'm going to use the current site and associated sites. So we have the same grid view option, but it's also suggested a better JSON view for a task list, and that is a calendar. So you can actually display tasks inside a calendar view and not just in the grid if you want to. And once more, we also have that display avatars option, which means we can see who the people are behind these tasks. So who's been assigned these tasks, in other words. So again, we get a easy to modify grid view here. We can do things like the data formatting. So as you can see, these dates, they're all actually the same time. We don't necessarily need to see the time in there. So I could come down to the more settings option and change the display format down to a short date. And that obviously takes up a bit less space. And we can also get into things like the conditional formatting. So if we go to more settings, you'll see that there is some formatting set, and it's just going through and looking for any document or any task that is becoming due within 3 days. It's going to show in a purple font, and anything that is overdue, it's going to show in red, and anything that is not due yet is going to show in green, and so on. So we can go through and add to that conditional formatting and so on if we want to as well. We can add our own. So on the priority column, for example, here, I could come down to formatting, and we can add the number of conditions that we need and set the choices. And even for custom columns, we enumerate the choices inside those choice columns, so you don't have to guess what the values are. We can just simply go through and select those. And now for each of these conditions, we can set the conditional formatting. So I'm going to go through and just use a pepper pot icon. So for anything high priority, I'm going to set in red, and anything that is normal priority, we'll use that pepper pot icon, but display it in amber or gold, whatever we might want to call that. And then anything that, like I say, is low priority, we'll go through and set that in green. So we've got very easily some conditional formatting that's highlighting those high priority tasks, as well as the normal priority and the low priority and so on. Okay, so that's the type of thing that we can do there. And we've now got a couple of views of content, which is really, really useful. And you'll just notice that when I go in to add more views, we could use the quick configuration to get to other types of content that isn't lists or libraries, such as Microsoft To Do. And if you've not used Microsoft To Do before, I'm just going to bring that up here. In fact, so let me just jump into SharePoint here, but I'm going to use the All Apps option and come into To Do. So you'll see that in To Do, this is more about your own personal tasks, and you can go through and create your own lists and then design your day. So at the very top is my day, and if there was something that I felt that I've got time to do today, I could simply go and find something and add it to my day. So I get to do all these things that are on my to-do lists. So as well as seeing tasks inside of SharePoint, we can also start to bring in those to-do lists as well, or even Microsoft Planner lists. And we could again bring those into a grid view, but also into a task view, which is one of the JSON views that we offer. So I'm going to do that. So we've got now tasks that are in SharePoint lists, and I've also got to do, which is coming from Microsoft To Do. And this allows me to see things like those lists. So we can see my training videos lists, the ticket research, other tasks, and so on. And we can go through and mark those as complete or add additional tasks to my to-do, all from within here. And of course, that's going to be personalized. So if somebody else was to use this view, they're going to see their own to-do. They're not going to see mine. It would all be about the current user. So that's using Microsoft Graph to get to do. And just to complement that even more, so you can get all of your tasks in one place, we could also show Planner as well. So if I add Microsoft Planner to the view here, we can simply select the Planner Plans app, and once more use the same view, the tasks view. So now we've got Planner, To Do, and tasks all in one place. And if we go to the Planner view, you'll notice that we can actually select, like the marketing plan, and see what tasks are assigned to people there. And we've also got the sales plan where we can do the same and even add tasks to that plan if we want to. And each of these can be interacted with. So if we needed to change who these tasks are assigned to, we can do that. We can again mark them as complete. We can also delete the task and that type of thing, all from within inside that view in the Lightning Conductor. Okay, so that's some of the sort of more common type reports that you can produce. We haven't yet got into the advanced mode, so we'll do that. But what I'm going to do is actually switch the application that we're using across to Teams. So inside of Teams, one of the challenges that I often face is I'm regularly creating meetings in a team. And if we just go ahead and do that, I could simply go through and inside this Lightning Tools sales team that I'm in, schedule a meeting. And when I schedule that meeting, I can, of course, specify what it is. So I'm just going to call this a general sales meeting. And we'll schedule this for tomorrow. And we can choose a time. So we'll have it for 12 noon when everybody was expecting to have lunch. And we can go through and add some attendees. So we'll simply select a couple of people there, and we can add a location. So we'll call this Lightning Tools HQ, and of course put in our agenda or whatever else we want to put into the notes here. Now, when I send that, it's going to send an invitation to those people, but then it kind of gets lost. It's going to appear in my calendar. So if I go to my own Teams calendar here, I'm going to see anything that was created inside these teams. So there it is. There's the general sales meeting happening tomorrow at 12 noon, and it will appear in those demo users that I invited. But there's no sort of overall calendar that's jumping out at me. Now, Microsoft have very recently created one. So let me show you that. So if you haven't seen this before, you can now go through and add a tab to your team. And there is one called channel calendar. There it is. So we can select the channel calendar, add that to the channel here, and you do get a calendar display inside the Lightning Tools calendar, and you can see that that meeting has taken place. But we also have a marketing team, and there may be other sales teams as well, such as regional sales teams. We could have sales for North America and sales for EMEA, sales for Southeast Asia, and so on. And we want to bring all of those calendars into one view. And that's where the Lightning Conductor can help, of course. So we can go through and add a new tab, but rather than using the My Calendar view, we're going to simply go through and select the Lightning Conductor. So I can choose that, add that to our view, and we can give the viewer a name, so it doesn't have to be called Lightning Conductor. We could actually rename that to be Sales and Marketing Events. So, so we'll save that. So that becomes obviously the title, but it's still the Lightning Conductor that's driving the view. And then we can configure, obviously using the quick configuration that you've already seen, but for this example, I need to jump into the advanced mode. So we're going to go through in the advanced mode and configure this new Microsoft 365 group Rollup provider, because every single time you create a new team, you are going to get a Microsoft 365 group created for you in the back end. So that's how we can go through and select where this content is going to come from. Now you have a choice here, same choice as what you have in the quick configuration. You can use the grid view, you can use a JSON view, or you can also use an XSLT view. So the JSON view is the one that we're going to select, and that means that this changes the behavior of the Lightning Conductor when I'm configuring it. It's going to expect to have a custom JSON view rather than me selecting the columns that I want to see inside the grid view. So we've got the JSON view selected. We can go through and choose our data source, and you'll see in here that we can select from individual Microsoft 365 groups, or we can also show or select from selected teams. So these are all my teams, the same teams that you'll see on the left-hand side here. So I'm going to choose the Lightning Tools sales team, but I also want to show content coming from the marketing team. So there it is. So it's scrolled past it. So I've got those two teams selected, and now we can tell it the type of data we want to see, so the entity type. And the top one is the one that we want, events, but notice that you can also see other things. So I could report on the owners or the members of these two teams. I could look at the drives associated with it, so the OneDrive content. Also, we've got sites and lists and list items and things like that that we can go and query by actually choosing the teams as the source. So I'm going to select the events in this case and choose save. And there's just a few refinements that we've got at the bottom here as well, such as things like item limits and limits per group, which I'm going to ignore for now. We could go to the columns tab, and this is where we can select the columns coming from that entity, but there's no need because I'm going to use the JSON view. So that JSON view that I'm going to select is this one here called the Lightning Tools Outlook Events Agenda. So if I choose that and hit save, you'll see that we've now got an aggregated view of any events that are taking place in marketing or in sales, all in one view. So that's a really useful thing if you do have content that spans multiple teams and you want to be able to view it in one place. And yeah, again, you can use the people cards here to see who those people are that are attending those events and that type of thing as well. Okay, so if we just jump back into the settings here, and you can see this view is again called default. This is a separate instance of the Lightning Conductor, so we're just going to call this one sales and marketing events, so that everybody's clear on what that is. And as I go back into the settings in here and hit the display tab, so when you do go back into that display option, you will see for some of these JSON files that there are some settings as well. And for things like the calendar, there is a standard calendar view where you can configure all of your conditional formatting and things like that. For this events agenda, there's some settings in here, such as how many events you might want to show. So you may want to show up to 20 events or something like that. And you can also choose whether you want to group by day or not. So that's something that I can turn on or turn off. So turning off the grouping by day just literally lists all of those different events and so on. So yeah, some of those JSON views are also configurable, and we'll have a look at a few more in just a moment. So also using the same sort of graph entity, I could very easily bring in my own events. This is from my own calendar. So as I go back into the quick configuration, again, you can do it from the quick config, this one. So we can go through and select the Outlook events. And these Outlook events are, as you can see here, my calendar. So it's querying my my events that will appear inside my Outlook, and that's going to be filtered based on each user that logs in. So we've got three different choices here. We've got a grid view, a calendar, or an agenda view. So I'll go with the agenda view first. And now I can see the teams that I'm a member of and the events that are coming up, but I can also go through and see if any of my events actually clash with that. So, so these are all my events coming from my own calendar and being displayed inside of that view. And once more, you could bring in things like tasks into this. So if we also wanted to try and figure out how we're going to do all of our tasks that are in our task list, we could actually bring that into a calendar rather than a grid view. So here we've now got the tasks in a calendar. If I scroll back a ways, yeah, we should start to see some overdue tasks. And you can see that these tasks are highlighted in red. And the reason for that is they are overdue. So we could go through into that display, and you can see, because we're using the calendar JS this time and not the Outlook events JS, that this is something that can be configured. So not just configured for things like conditional formatting, but you can actually use this against any SharePoint list. So even if you've got a custom list that has a start date and an end date in it, you can actually map those to your own columns, so you can display any type of list inside a calendar, and then go through and set things like the conditional formatting. So yeah, in here you can see the green, the purple, and the red being applied to the JSON view as well, depending on whether those tasks are overdue. And if you want to customize maybe the layout of these JSON views, you can do that as well. So clicking onto this information symbol over on the right, there's our code behind the JSON. You can copy that and basically make that your own. And once you've copied it, you can create it in a file and upload it to the JavaScript files library, and that'll be something that you could then select for your own scenarios as well. Okay, so that's a few different views here inside of Teams. What I'm going to do is just add another one as well. And this is going to be documents, because documents, as you'll go through and create teams with different channels, you'll notice that every channel you create in a team will actually go through and create you a separate folder inside the document library. So one of the things that we might want to do is just aggregate all of that content so we can see it in one place, not just from this particular team, but from multiple teams. So we could in fact call this sales documents. And as we go through and configure that one, I could do that here in the quick config, but I want to also show you the advanced mode. So I'm going to go through and select the object model rollup provider and the grid view rather than a JSON view this time. And notice that we can query our content. So this time I can expand the current site collection, which is right at the very top, and select these sites here. So I'm going to include those sites in my query. I could hit the checkbox as well, which means I want to include anything that maybe doesn't exist yet. So if regions starts to select, gather some other team sites as sub-sites, then we can tick that checkbox and they will also be included in the aggregation. And we can scroll down here to our marketing site and start to include that as well. So we've got the marketing documents and the sales documents going to come through. So we just need to tell it here that it is documents that we're after. So this is where we can go through and select the template behind the list or the library. You could optionally also go through and choose a content type, including any custom content types that you've created, and also some other refinements. So what's the item limit that we want to return, and do we want to honor filters and that type of thing. On the columns tab is where we can choose the columns initially that we want to display. So I've got things like the file size here, which for marketing content might be important because this is potentially large files and graphics and so on. We've got the name of the file and who it was last modified by and things like that as well. And you can drag these columns into the order that you want them to appear in. And you can also add calculated columns. You can create filters and other attributes as well behind there as well, such as sorting and things like that. So once I've got the columns that I want to work with, we can hit the display tab, and this is where we can add some of those display formats that we saw in the grid view before. So we can choose how we want to display the file size in kilobytes, megabytes, or gigabytes. We've got the created by, where I can show the user's avatar and even link out to that user if we want to. We've got the short date option for when it was created and that type of thing. And even for name, we can hide the file extension and things like that if we want to. So we've got the properties that we want to set for those columns, and in here we've also got some other grid view settings as well. So we can have sticky headers, so as we scroll down we don't lose sight of the column names and so on. We can again set pagination and choose where our pagination controls are going to be, and under the grouping and linking section we can select which column contains the hyperlink to actually open up that item, and we can choose whether we want to open that item in the current window or open it up in the Office application. We've also got a sub menu as well where we can view properties, edit properties, and open the document. And there is also the ability to show the icon for each file as well, so we can see whether it's an Excel document, Word document, and so on. And finally is grouping. So I can group by folders and have those collapsed by default, which would actually allow me to navigate the folder structure. So in here, we've now got, like I say, the events coming through, tasks, but I've also got all of my sales related documents all in one place inside of Teams. So I can access all of those folders, access my files without having to keep jumping back to SharePoint or into different teams in order to be able to get to that content. So that's how the product can be used inside of Teams as well as SharePoint. And whilst we are in here, just point out, we do honor things like the dark mode and the high contrast mode and things like that. So the Lightning Conductor sort of fits in with that theme that's being applied to your Teams environment. So we're going to just jump back into SharePoint for a moment, because the other thing I wanted to demonstrate to you is also how we can use some of the other web parts in conjunction with the Lightning Conductor. And this is through web part connections. So what I'm going to do here is actually add the Lightning Conductor, and we'll configure that to just do a simple query of documents coming from the hub. So the current site and anything associated with it. And above that, I'm also going to go through and add the filter web part. So Lightning Filters is something that can provide a filter to this web part, but also to other instances of the Lightning Conductor at the same time. And we can map it to whichever column we want that is currently displayed, and we can choose the type of filter that we're about to create as well. So if, for example, we wanted to filter against that task list, we could offer a choice of high priority, normal priority, and low priority as a drop-down choice. We can also use things like manage metadata. So you can choose a term from your term store and pass that through to the Lightning Conductor. And for this example here, I'm going to use a people filter, which, as you can see, this turns that into a people picker. So we can go through and literally select a user or multiple users and filter based on those users. So I'm going to configure that filter web part to work with the current user by default. So you can see that that's put in my user account, but I could remove that and add somebody else. And I can also force it to only allow users and not groups when we're filtering. Now we can give it a more meaningful name than just Lightning Filters. So I could say here, filter documents by user. And that just explains what to do to anybody using this. And now we get to map it. So I can go into the properties of the Lightning Conductor, bring up the configuration for the view, and against the columns, I can now add a filter against something like the modified by or the created by. But actually what I want to do is both. So instead of adding my filter here against each column, I'm going to add a advanced filter and add two conditions that are wrapped in an or statement. And we'll basically say it was created by or it was modified by. And rather than choosing me, which would always be the current user, I'm going to map it through to my filter web part, which has that label filter documents by user. So we'll select that, and we're going to filter on the title column for the user. That's the one that's actually displayed here in the Lightning Conductor results. So I'll do that twice for both conditions. So it is either created by or modified by the user that I'll select. And now we can go through and save that. So all of the documents that you'll now see were all either created by or modified by the Lightning Tools account. But notice here that we can now remove that, which clears the results of documents, and I can go through and query another user's documents by selecting that user. So here we can see demo user 5 had actually gone through and created this folder here. Okay, so that becomes something where it's not filtering just on the current user, but giving you the option to perhaps explore documents based on other people. And yeah, we could add multiple people to that as well if we wanted to. So that's using the filter web part. And what we'll do is just remove that. And I'm just going to clear the configuration for this view here. And we're going to go back to just a simple task query. So we'll query the different tasks inside the current site and associated sites again. And what I'm going to do here is actually split my page in two. So we'll add two columns. So we've got the Lightning Conductor over to the left here with those results. And of course, we could hide some columns if they're not actually relevant anymore. So we can get that down to fit into that column. And over on the right hand side, we're going to add the data viewer. And the data viewer is something that can connect to external data sources. It can also connect to content inside of SharePoint, like Excel documents and things like that. And we can also connect it to individual SharePoint lists or to other web parts. And that's what I'm going to do here is connect this to the Lightning Conductor. So we're going to go through and choose the current page data source. And we're going to build a chart. So the data source is going to rely on a web part connection. So we're going to now go through and select the Lightning Conductor as the other web part that we want to connect to. And I'm going to have it work with all of the retrieved items coming from that Lightning Conductor. So all of those tasks there. And once we've done that, you'll notice that we've got the columns coming in from the Lightning Conductor. So these are the ones that I selected when I configured it. So the title, assigned to, and so on. And I'm going to use the ID column and the priority column in order to actually figure out how many tasks we've got, perhaps of this project to complete in each of these different stages. So we'll choose those two, and when we come down to the display, you'll notice that we can choose things like gauges or tree maps. We've got pie charts and combo charts as well. So I think the pie chart is going to be better suited. We can go through and configure the different colors that are displayed here and group by the priority as well. It will randomly choose colors, so we've got a nice bright pink, and one of the things that we might want to do is make sure that this merges with the current theme that we've got selected on the site as well, and maybe choose some other colors that sort of fit into the tone of that, so we can narrow down these tones here if we want to. Oops, or not, as the case may be with that one. Let's go through and choose a. I guess that color was too close. There we go. So we can choose some different colors that might blend in well. Yeah, not too happy about that color. Oh, that one apparently. Okay, red it is. So there's our colors for the chart, and we can also go into the chart settings and make this 3D and things like that if we want to. So now we've got results coming in, but we can actually also report further on that content report by seeing that information inside a chart as well. And for each of these, when you are sort of bringing those three web parts together, you can make your dashboard look a little bit slicker by hiding a lot of the commands on the command bar. Likewise for the Lightning Conductor as well. If you want to, you can go through and hide all the different options there as well. And that will just make that page look a little bit slicker as well. So that's something that you can do here inside of SharePoint. And if you wanted to, you could also bring that entire page through to Teams as well. So when we do add the Lightning Conductor as a tab inside of Teams, of course, it's only going to show one instance of the Lightning Conductor, but you could also bring in a page here. And when you start to select the pages, we can literally bring in any page we like. So I forget which one that is. So let me just choose that one. There we go, a few seconds ago. So that way we do get that entire dashboard coming through to the Teams environment and not just the one single web part. Okay, so that's the type of thing that we can do with the Lightning Conductor. So as you've seen there, we've been able to bring in content from SharePoint lists and libraries. We've also brought content in from Microsoft Graph. We could bring in content through search as well. And then we were able to filter that further with the Lightning Filters web part and display charts with the data viewer. So that's everything I wanted to demonstrate today, but I see there are a couple of questions, so I'm just going to go through those. So one of them actually was about conditional formatting in the calendar view. Yeah, that's possibly asked just before I demonstrated it. So yeah, you can use our JSON views, and we have exposed some properties in each one of them. So you'll see different types of properties depending on the JSON view that you selected. But for the calendar view specifically, yes, you can apply the conditional formatting without having to write any code there. Yeah, that hopefully answers that question. So for the calendar view, is there an add button on the items? So that's a great question. And in fact, I think two people have asked the same question here. Yeah, can you add a new event, or can you add a new calendar item from within inside the JSON view? So the answer to that one, for the graph queries, you can. So if I'm querying events from Planner or also from Microsoft To Do, then yes, I can add, because it's obvious where that item is going to be created. if we're aggregating 50 different task lists into one calendar, we don't allow the creation of the task, because of course the next question is, well, which task list is this task going to be created in, and so on. So for lists and library queries, it is just about displaying the content and not writing back. But yeah, for some of the graph entities, you can write back to them as well. Okay, so yeah, another question just come in. So when you add views, can you merge the results so you do not have to flick between them in order to see the whole picture? Okay, great question. So I guess from that question, you may want to bring in from two different types of lists. So maybe bringing in say documents from document libraries and maybe images from an images library, but display them as files. So yeah, you can merge them if it kind of makes sense to do so. Every SharePoint list has a title column, for example. It has a created, it has a modified by, and so on. So you can display all of that content, absolutely. And my preferred way of doing that is actually to use search. You can use it using the object model. But if I just jump into back into the demo again, and we just add a single column section at the top here. So I'll add the Lightning Conductor. So yeah, jumping into the advanced mode, what we could do in that scenario is use the object model, and against the data source here, I could go through and say, I want to aggregate content from these different sites here. So I could choose those. And here where it says the list type, notice this doesn't have to be one list type, it can be many list types. Yeah, I could, for example, display issue tracking as well as project tasks or something like that, or document libraries and image libraries, whatever it might be. But when we go to specify the columns that we want, it's only going to show me the columns that are common across those two list types. Yeah, just be aware of that one when you're using that. The other method is to go against the search Rollup provider. And for this one, you see result sources. So notice there's no longer a tree view to bring back content. And this is a great way also of querying content. We can say, I want to look for certain items matching a particular content type, or I can use some of the other result sources, like the recently changed items would be a good one. So if I choose the recently changed items, on the column view here, I can still display things like the author, and we'll have the title of that item, which I could again bring up to the top, and anything else like last modified time or whatever it might be. You've even got the site name that it was created in. That's a great one to group by. And there's list name as well. And so, yeah, when I go through and I can format that, so I can still show avatars for the authors and set how I want to display the title column and the site name, etc. And then when we hit save, this is actually bringing back content from lots of different types of lists, all in one place. And again, you can go through and format this so it looks a little bit nicer as well. So you could do that. The other way of doing it, another option would be also to use Microsoft Graph. So you could use the Graph Rollup provider, and that actually gives me list item. And all we need to do here is add a query and tell it what type of item we're after. So we've got a few there that you can select from, but you can also create your own custom graph query in there in order to get to content. Okay, so I guess a follow-on question to that is, can you aggregate calendars into one view as well? So yeah, you can go against different calendars. So again, if they're SharePoint lists, such as the events list, you could bring them in. Same with tasks as well. So yeah, absolutely, you could query that. And likewise with some of the Microsoft Graph entities as well, can all be displayed inside the view. And yeah, just to point out as well, when you are creating these views, let me just remove that one because there's a lot of content I didn't set the pagination. When you do have multiple views, so I'll just clone this view just so we've got two. So I could call that tasks and another tasks or whatever. So when I've got multiple views here, rather than actually selecting the drop down and choosing the view, that's another thing that you could either use the filter web part for. So you could produce the choice of views in a drop down. And for that, you can go through and manage the choices. So you could say, do we want to display tasks? Or do we want to display documents, for example? So you've got the display and the internal name for that. So that becomes a choice that we can go through and select. And rather than actually mapping that to a column, we can map that to the views. So you'll notice in here, I can connect the current view to our Lightning Filters web part. And that allows me to go through and choose that filterable value. So when I choose the drop down and select tasks, it will load the tasks view. And when I choose documents, it will try and look for a document view. Obviously, that one wasn't set correctly with the values, but that's basically what that's going to achieve. Okay, so yeah, what about Microsoft 365 group calendars? Yep, absolutely. So again, if we were to choose the Microsoft 365 group rollup provider, and I'll select the JSON display provider here. So my data source would be to select from multiple groups. So these are my Microsoft 365 groups. So we could go through and choose those. And on the display then, yeah, we can use that Outlook events agenda for the agenda view, or also the calendar view. So I didn't tell it what I wanted to look at. So I wanted to look at events. Yep. So that's coming in from multiple groups into one agenda view, and for the calendar view, you will need to do some mapping here. So what you'd need to do is set the start date column name and the end date column name and the title column that you want to map through to it. And you can get that from this columns view here. So these values here, we would basically take those and drop them in, and that would display those results in the calendar view for you. But it's just about mapping those properties. Okay. So I think that was all the questions. Oh, there's one additional one. So you get the data viewer. That is a separate product. It's a separate product because it works with multiple other products of ours. So we can use the data viewer to report against one of our products called Social Squared. So you can see who's using discussion boards and what the most popular discussion boards and things like that. You can also chart content, as you can see from the Lightning Conductor, but it could also be used standalone. So if you wanted to use that to, like I say, build a chart on an external data source, such as a SQL database or something like that, you could also do that. But we do offer suites, so there's discounts on sort of second and third products and so on as well. Okay, So I think that's all the questions. So I'm just going to thank everybody for attending. I hope you found that useful. If there's any questions at all, please let us know. Or if there's something specific that you want to see from the Lightning Conductor, we'd be happy to set up a private demonstration. So you can do that by going to the Lightning Conductor page, and there's a book a demo link on that site there, where it's going to simply go through and help you to schedule a private demo based on your timing. So thanks very much, everybody. I hope you found that useful, and see you again soon.